Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Michael Chikeen, and in the virtual studio today, I have with me Andrew Newman. Andrew is the award-winning author and founder of ConsciousStories.com, a growing series of bedtime stories purpose-built to support parent-child connection in the last 20 minutes of the day. His professional background includes deep training in therapeutic healing work and mindfulness. He hosts speaking events and workshops for children, K-5, parents, and teachers alike. Andrew has been an opening speaker for Deepak Chopra, a TEDx presenter in Findhorn, Scotland, and author in residence at the Bixby School in Boulder, Colorado. He's actively involved in men's work through the Mankind Project since 2006. Andrew also counsels parents, helping them return to their center so they can be more deeply present with their kids. So we're going to talk about all that and some of his stories as well. Andrew Newman, welcome to the show.
Michael, so great to be here. This is going to be a great adventure for us to explore, get to know each other a little bit, know some more about each other, know some less. I like the title of the podcast a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, when I came across your profile and you're kind enough to send me one of your stories to read, I really love what you're doing. So I'm excited to hear more about. Because especially creative endeavors, I'm always excited how a creator gets an idea and then they follow through and go ahead and do it. It seems like you've been creating a lot of stories for a while now. So yeah, please share with me like how you got the this idea in your head to create these great kid stories.
You know, Michael, when I was 28 or 29, I didn't identify as being creative at all. And it was a small miracle that I found myself in the world of personal development. In my case, that looked like going to a healing school for a number of years, learning energy healing and developmental psychology models that were about, hey, what happened in the first 6 years of my life and other people's lives that then began to set up our belief systems about how the world is and how we need to be in the world in order to be safe and in order to be loved. And I'd never explored anything like this. Now, along the way, there was a component of creative arts in the study, and that's where I flourished. And this creativity bubbled up in me that I didn't know I had, in partly because I grew up in apartheid South Africa, and it was an era of control, and that my family weren't super creative or super encouraging of creativity. And so I put together these two passions of mine, the one of healing and helping people, and the other of this creative self-expression. And I'd been looking at my adult clients and classmates and myself, and here we were, most of us in our 30s, 40s, 50s, trying to unravel what had happened to us in the first 6 years of our life. And I thought, wow, it's a whole lot of work to do that. Why don't we do better right in the first 6 years? What is it that I can bring that would be helpful in supporting parents to support more meaningfully with their kids around some subjects that are big human thematic subjects that we were seeing all of us working with in these studies and in the personal development programs. I'm like, let's just introduce them early. Kids will learn anything we are brave enough to introduce to them. They'll onboard it and they'll find their way with it, and they've got their own experience that they can then make sense of what it is to be who they are.
Right. That's amazing because I love that you said like kids will take anything on board. They'll learn anything. And I think that is very evident in people that want to really impress religion on their kids, and they'll take that on board. Mm-hmm. But also, like, I have a bunch of friends now that are therapists, and I see that they're explaining some of these concepts to their children that are like 4 and 5 years old about, feelings and emotional regulation and all these things, and the kids are understanding it, and they're coming back to their moms and saying like, okay, mom, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, like, and so they're trying to like work through their feelings. Whereas I think our generation, you and I are probably similar in age, that like that just wasn't the playbook. And I don't, and I really, as much as I think a lot of even adult children do, and I was guilty for it at some point, blame the parents for like, come on, you guys could have done better. I don't think it was even like they didn't know they had to deal with their kids' feelings. They're like, go fuck off and wash the dishes. Like, stop annoying me. What's the problem here?
Children are meant to be seen and not heard.
Right.
Right?
And even like we mentioned the pre-call here, that like I'm currently doing some research into the lives of boys and men, and especially boys, like they're treated that they have a smaller emotional bandwidth than girls, when like scientifically that's just false. And
Right.
so these boys will grow up thinking that they don't have this emotional reservoir, or they're not allowed to be more expressive. And then you go through life, and then you're punished as a man later on, because either you're not manly enough, or you don't have the emotions that that were stolen from you when you were a boy. So it's amazing that like you're giving parents more of these resources. What was your first book that your idea that you came up with?
The first story was just a poem that needed some pictures. So again, I didn't yet know they were going to become a thing. I'd lived in Scotland at the time, and I was out in the hill with a journal, and I wrote a poem, which I did quite a lot of. And I thought, wow, it needs some pictures. It's this little story called A Little Light. And in this story, our lead character is this little boy. Of course, it was all about me. I didn't really know that yet. Once upon a time, there was a little light who intended to shine a rainbow so bright. He had a little body. It started to grow. He learned all the things he needed to know. And some of them were wrong and blocked up his flow. So we're right on the subject. It was like, there I was. I'd been learning all of these little rules of what it was to be a boy or a man in South Africa, and certainly, having emotions wasn't part of that. And the rules in quotation said, no, big boys don't cry. If you don't play rugby, and if you don't learn how to join the military cadets, then you're a sissy, is kind of what it was. That wasn't the atmosphere there. And here I was, we didn't have the language yet to say I was a sensitive kid. I was a sensitive kid. I didn't have the language yet to know that I was a little dysregulated by my ADHD, which nobody ever discussed in that era or time and space. And this little story went on to be something I just thought I'd just make it. And I was terrified to share it. That was one of the interesting things. I instructed my friend very sternly, who was doing the illustrations, you can't tell anybody about it. And part of that was a protective mechanism, because I simply knew I wasn't ready for the world's feedback. This was a big, brave, creative step for me to have a creative impulse or an idea come up in me, and for me to stick to it. It took some time. I was making £10 an hour, and she charged £10 an hour. So, it wasn't like a financially flush thing. She had never made a book. I'd never made a book. We worked it out together. And then the book sat quietly, and I had this deep, quiet, brooding satisfaction about having made it. And it took a long time before I was ready for feedback from other people, for them to say whether or not they liked it. And later I realized that actually this is important. Like, sometimes, particularly if we've grown up with a lot of hostility in our personal environment around feedback around who we are, if what we created wasn't well received, then just don't not create it. Just create it and don't share it. And so that you get the experience of having done what's really the first step of a very profound healing journey in putting your heart and your soul and your spirit into an idea that's yours, and then following it through. I think that's very important for our self-expression.
Yeah, I think it's not a stretch to say like most really creative people are more sensitive. And especially if you're creating something that's more personal that you feel has a chunk of you in there. It's like putting a piece of your heart into this creation and then sending it out in the world and being like, you don't like my heart, but I made it for people.
Right.
And
Ouch, ouch.
yeah, right. Right. And it's tough because I think that like that feedback, the constructive ones, let's take away some of the troll factor, but like the great feedback is going to help you create so many better books and reach people more, and like there is a give and take with this giving of ourselves to the world, and how they receive it. That's part of the process I've
Yeah.
experienced, but still, man, it's especially your first one. Have you found like after so many books now, you're better with like, I'm happy to gift this, and however the world receives it,
Yeah.
it's okay? Or how has that process evolved for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It used to be held very close to the chest. It now, not only is that eased in me that I trust my own creative impulse a lot more, and I'm willing to put it out and believe that it will land. I also have a team who I invite their opinion and their feedback. So even in the first books, I didn't even know what an editor was. I was like, why do I need an editor? I know everything about spelling and
Right.
punctuation. Yeah, and we learned later that it is this wonderful partner in the writing process, and it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. I mean, there's a book sitting in the background that got got all the way through our writing process, all the way through our illustration process, and got to the end, and then I sat back and had a look at it and went, I've accidentally exaggerated every possible racial bias that could happen because I made a character, a little black boy by the name of Ed, and I had the artwork done by a white male South African illustrator with a cartooning style that exaggerated all of the negative artistic biases that have ever been put into place. And the story was called The Silver Bullet Hunter. So there were bullets in the story. And I was like, Andrew, what have you done? I was like, we just have to press pause. It was like I needed to go through every step until I got the real mirroring and the feedback for me to look at it and go, oh, wow. Like the blinkers came off and the clarity came in. And it really was very helpful at one stage that I went and got an assessment done by a specialist in racial diversity in kids' books, because I knew that something was off, but I couldn't see it for the life of me, and and that's what happens with racial bias, particularly if you're a white South African man. For me, I'll own that personally. It's like I've done my work in the space, in men's work and in therapy groups in different places, but I grew up with such a skewed perspective of the world that I have to be very careful that I'm not continuing it in a blind spot.
Right. Wow. Well, good for you, even for like that you could like hear that spidey sense, like Spider-Man's little awareness that said, oh, well, there's something here that is not clicking. I should go get a professional to look at this.
Yeah,
Because,
but
man, that could have been not good.
yeah, I mean, but let me tell you about some stories that really clicked, right? So,
Right.
so there's a story in our collection called there's 23 books now. So, The Boy Who Searched for Silence. Uh, I do a 4-day silent retreat. It's a meditation, and I'm not allowed to journal anything. And then, as I finish the retreat, the story writes itself in 5 minutes, start to finish. It took 5 minutes with an editor. We looked at it and said, no, it's done. And then let's go and find, and then it was an opportunity to find an illustrator. And I wanted an illustrator who had a mindfulness practice or meditation practice of their own. And that's when I started working with Alexis Aronson, who's gone on to do several of the artistic things that we have. There's another story here called Rolling Thunder Finds His Herd. This is a horse story, and it's reducing kids' anxiety in new environments. And the way that I invited the story forward, I've done some training in equine psychotherapy. I've got experience of what it's like to sit with a large herd of horses. And that's exactly what I did. I took the journal out into the middle of a paddock and I sat down and I invited the horses to give me a story. And it's a strange thing sitting on the ground with big horses coming. They're very curious and they all came up to visit me, and I knew the pecking order and the different rank. And I was in Colorado at the time. And it was a moment where I glanced out across the purple-esque Colorado Rocky Mountains and the gray skyline. And it was as if a horse angel flew through the air. And I was like, whoa. And then the story wrote itself, right? And it was like, I'm like, okay, these moments of inspiration that creativity can be for us, and the opportunity to then follow that, there's a lot more success stories than that one little snippet that I actually count as a success, because it was illuminating and learning and helped me grow.
Wow, that's a really cool story about the horses. And how many books do you have now?
23
Okay.
now.
And people, like, are you distributed through certain stores, or they find you directly through your website only?
Yeah, we're direct through website on consciousstories.com. We're also available through Amazon. It's a slightly different product because it's printed differently. So the just depending where one is in the world as to whether or not we can ship it affordably. We're very well resourced in Canada, America, and Australia. And then in Europe, it tends to be that one of the Amazons helps out with a good option.
Oh, it's like printing on demand.
Printing on demand. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure the quality would be a little bit different because it's less controlled from your end, I guess.
Yeah, we can't put sticker sheets in at Amazon and print on demand, and we can do little things like that that come from us. But all of the books have the same architecture. We bring folks in with what's called the snuggle breathing meditation. It's 4 simple breaths that helps transition into story time, attune to self, attune to each other, and it's just a great relaxer. From there, we go into this adventure-filled story where our kids are falling in love with a hero who has a challenge, but it's a relatable challenge, or one that they will certainly face in their life. And at the end of the story, then there's this conversation starting activity page that helps parents just land the core lessons that are embedded into each book. And then, as I said, some of them even got stickers, which of course our vision is to have all of our inventory all over the world with stickers, but we're got to roll it out still.
Right. Well, it's really interesting because even hearing how you use like horses, or you sent me the one about hugs, and I wonder if just like teaching kids these things that they already understand, like even younger kids will know what a horse is, they will understand what a hug is, and so just these concepts, I wonder, like sharing this with their parents, if it even helps them sleep better, to feel a little more connected at bedtime. Have you had any feedback from parents that have bought your stories?
Yeah, so story time is a benefit for both the adult and the child. You're catching something quite on the point there. It's the parental anxiety is, am I a good enough parent? And the way that anxiety comes down and settles in the parent is when they get good, meaningful connection with their kid. But when you pick a kid up after school and you go, "How was your day?" you get nothing from them, right? It was fine, and they're tired, and they're transitioning, and it just doesn't always really become the meaningful connection that we like to have. And yet, when we come alongside them at night and we snuggle in bed for story time, there's a change in posture. We're no longer the parent who's setting the rules, or creating the safety. We're the parent who is the ally, the friend, together going on the adventure. And so as that posture becomes side by side, and as the storybook becomes the center focus, it's like, I don't know if you've ever noticed that you can have great conversations when you're doing long distance drives in the car. And
oh yeah,
isn't it great? It's like you're side by side. You can talk about really difficult things, and you've still got to keep your eyes on the road, and you don't have to have the intensity that a face-to-face conversation can have. And storytime opens things up here. And so it allows this bridge The parents get to connect with the kids. Kids get chatty at that time, and one of my encouragements to parents is to follow the child, don't follow the story. So in other words, be willing to put down your agenda to finish the story. If your child is sharing something that is a doorway into their heart, follow the doorway to their heart, get chatting, expect it to take longer than the 10 or 15 minutes that you think it should take, right? And make it a joyful experience. It's like if your kid's under 7 years old, the chances are you're putting them to bed every night anyway. And this was one of the things that I wanted to do when I got to understand how challenging. I'm not a parent yet, but I can see how much there is and how many directions parents are pulled in. And it's like they just don't need one more thing to learn or to do. And I was like, we're not giving you one more thing. We're giving you something you're already doing. You're already doing story time. You're already seeking connection. Let's give you a tool that you're not bored by the story because it gives you something that you can learn from, like the hug who got stuck in the hug factory that we can explore together. And you can recognize that what happens to the character happens to you in your life as an adult and happens to your kid in their life. And so we've got this multi-age opportunity, I guess.
Wow. And wow, because I'm thinking of like, yeah, you said like parents are thinking, well, maybe this is too much for me to do. Like, and at what point are you instructing them about if your kid opens their heart to you, take that path, opposed to just thinking that you have to get them to bed right away because maybe it's something they need to share? Because that's an amazing insight that, I'm sure, like, again, I don't have kids either. So like, I wonder if you've had a long day as a parent, you just want to read the story to your kid, put them to bed, but then they start sharing something, and maybe the instinct is to be like, can I finish the story, Brad? do you know? And so is that from feedback that you received from parents, and where did you put it to tell them, like at the beginning of the book?
Yeah, it's woven through a few things. So there's an invitational letter in the start of each book. This is something that has come alive a lot in conversations like this on podcast, more than it's necessarily in the book. But again, the activity page at the end is an inherent conversation starter. So what we've been finding is that our parents are discovering things about their kids that they didn't know, because this is when the kids have done the opening up. This is when they've been sharing. Now we put a little thing so that here's our little brain people story, and if you didn't know that's I've got to get it right. That's dopamine and that's serotonin. So we've created characters out of the neurotransmitters. So there's your 4-year-old talking to you now about dopamine and serotonin and what happened to them in the brain when there was fight, flight, and freeze.
Right.
And it's like they've just absorbed the language. They've created the world. They've got the world alive inside of them. When you get to the end of it, we have a brain balance barometer. And this allows us to see, where are we in the brain? Are we in the safe space, feeling safe and loved, calm, focused, right, and happy? Or are we in the red zone here? We're having what I call a yucky brain moment. Now we've got kids talking about yucky brain moments and parents talking about it, whether it's just like, and it takes the pressure off. Hey, what's going on? Oh, you must be having a yucky brain moment. Let's press the all clear reset button. Now we've learned about in the story, and we can go into sighing, breathing, and relaxing and restoring calm again.
Wow.
And so the mechanism's it's just right there. It's like it's right there for the parents, and then we get to practice it both at bedtime. We practice it whenever we do story time. It becomes a tool in the house and a common language that can be used.
Right. And how do you deconstruct, I guess, what these stories going to be? Do you have a concept for like, okay, these are the things that we should teach kids under the age of 7. I'm going to take this one concept here, and then you start thinking about characters and how you could, feed this sort of information to a kid in a very, sweet and gentle way? Or like, how do these topics hit you?
They're a little bit like watching a butterfly fly past, and I just reach up and go, oh, hello, there's an idea. As creative ideas can be, I occupy the spiritual psychological seat in the education remit world, or in the world of books. That's my position, is that, is developmental psychology, with an energetic spiritual perspective. One of the things that I learned was what I call a healing response. Now, that's like the hero's journey, where you hear as a character, you meet them, you fall in love, they start going on an adventure, they start getting into trouble, and they get really stuck, and they don't know what to do from that moment. The healing response is what happens after that. It's the piece that allows that character to find their way out of difficulty and come back into the world with their treasures from their adventures, even prouder, fuller, more successful, victorious.
Right.
And that story arc is something that has been really important in my world, to help kids firstly have the resonant experience of like, yes, I know what that stuck place feels like. In the little brain people, the brain freezes and everything gets stuck, and we know what that's like. And then Auntie Oxytocin comes, and luckily she restores calm, and beautiful music plays. And it's like, as you read the story, your body goes on this journey, and it's like, oh, whew, I feel so much better because everybody got free.
Right.
And so it's like the story impregnates the atmosphere of the home. Every time you read it, you get this story arc that lets your body find a way to go from tightness into relaxation, tightness, relaxation, tightness, relaxation, and that's our natural healing state, is to be moving towards relaxation.
Right. Wow. And have parents given you feedback if they're buying more of these books for like boys or girls, or like has that ever come up, or is that impossible to track?
No, we don't know the metric like that. We do get asked about how many characters we've got, and how many are boys and how many are girls, and where they fit. And I don't remember the
Wow.
list offhand, but I can say it's been attended to. We have the answer for people who post on
Yeah.
our social media and ask that question. We find a wide range of ages. We have there are the parents who start reading in utero. There are folks who pick it up at like 1 and 2. There's other folks who are really choosing. We don't do board books, for example. And developmentally, board books and ABCs and simple readers would be the earliest books that kids would start with. And we really come in on the 3 through 7 age group. But then something interesting happens, because as kids start tweening, the 10s, 11s, 12s, they want nothing to do with a picture book like this, right? Because they're
Right.
reading other things. But come back round at 20, 21, 23, and there's university lecturers who decided to do story time with their kids
What?
at college level, and they're having fun with that and just using it to illustrate an example and a point. And then I think our oldest super fan is a 94-year-old who we know about, and she's like at the other end of life, there's things with immense simplicity that we really appreciate, and coming all the way back to those memories of what it was like to have mum and dad, or what it was like to not have mum and dad, which was often the case, and to give
Right.
oneself that medicine by taking the time to engage and read something that brings you joy.
Wow. So yeah, I guess you could theorize that 93-year-old, like you said, perhaps she, 93-year-old, she definitely had a war era sort of upbringing,
You're right.
and so if you think her parents are from the 1800s, then there were no time for feelings in children then. So if she's learning all these things about what's happened between 0 to 7 for her, as you and I discussed that we are, she must be thinking, okay, so this is the part that maybe I was missing when I was a little girl in 19 30 or whatever. I can't even imagine which the changes she's seen. So
Yeah.
yes, that's really great that you can get feedback on social media or through your clients, because I'm sure there's so many people that can, if they're buying your stories and buying more than one, they're seeing like direct benefit, and I'm sure that brings you so much joy.
Yeah. And I always knew that this was going to be a long game. I've actually read a kid's book that had been kept in someone's family for there were 73 years in the one. They all wrote when they received the book in the front cover, and so there were 73 years in one of those gaps, and then there were people before that as well. And it was like this one. This is why, for me, people say, why aren't you on iPad? And I'm like, no, here's the book, knock knock. This is a physical thing that we also have this a feeling of like, this is mine. And yes, I share it. In fact, the first thing in the book also says this book belongs to, it's crossed out, says this book is shared with, and it's shared with the members of the family, and it's passed around, and it's a community resource. And when you're done with it, because your kids have grown up, it'll go to a library or one of those small neighborhood libraries that are so beautiful. And this physical book can stick around with a little bit of care. It can be here for decades, helping different families as they discover it.
Right. And did you make that change in the book from this book belongs to shared to, based on the story of hearing the family share that book for?
No, it was really an impulse of mine. It was this choice of mine to say, I'm a community guy. It was something that I did not grow up in the African village, but I sure wish I had. And that aspect that seems to have fallen away. One of the stories here is called "We Are Circle People," and it just, again, helping children find connection and belonging in the modern day village. And these are some of the suffering points that I was looking at in the adult space. It's like this cry to belong, and the cry of aloneness that happens in adults, and then we get to the family unit that's like if it's a 4-person family unit with 2 parents and 2 kids, there's a whole lot of stress. Where's the extended family? Where's the village? What happens when there's a separation or a more modern day equivalent of a family emerging? It's like we need that extra support around us.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting that you mentioned the African village. So I met a guy recently, and we become buddies. And he was raised in the West, but he was born in Africa. And the way I think it worked, if I'm remembering the story correctly, is that his parents moved to the West for jobs, but it was in the culture at that time that they left him behind with the village and his grandmother in Africa until they could bring him over and knew that everything was safe, etc. And so he says he didn't really remember meeting his parents until he was like 5 or 6 years old or something like that. And he said like his first year adjustment was really tough because in the village in Africa, he felt loved by everybody. Like all the kids would play together. His grandmother was there, his aunts and uncles, other people, like they were all around all the time. So when you go from that to more Western culture where it's just the parents and you're all in your home, and then maybe you have friends and you go out, like there's less community, that like I can really see the difference in that. And it's and I guess South Africa is no, because when I hear of Africa, I don't think of South Africa.
I understand.
For whatever reason. So is South Africa similar to that culture?
Again, lots of that historically, but a lot of it also being lost. The urbanization process has lost the village community feel of that. There's certainly in South Africa. I live in Cape Town, and the Cape Town community, the African community, there are Xhosa, or technically speaking, isiXhosa is the name of the community. And they don't really identify as Cape Town as being home. They go, home is back there. It's up the coast, in the Eastern Cape. where we have the family land and the family house, and if there's a wedding, it's there. If there's a funeral, it's there. That's where the village is, and then the corrosiveness of urbanization and economics, and calling people into really confined living spaces and in cities. It's interesting for me, because the part of me is like, I don't really want to be bashing the way the world's gone. It's like, this is the way it's gone, and this is some of the cost of it. And yet then there's a remembering, and there's a certain that's inherent in that story. We are circle people. In the story that you just shared of this young man who was raised on the continent of Africa whilst his parents were away, there's a certain wisdom that's still carried and still remembered, and I feel like it'll be held in the collective. I look, for example, at there's phenomenal community grief rituals that you can go and do in the Pacific Northwest, the west coast of America. And you can do that because a couple by the name of Sabonfu and Malidoma came over from Burkina Faso in West Africa, bringing the village rituals and rhythms over to the West. And they mentored and they taught people for many years. And there's a lineage of people carrying that work on in the West that just, I mean, would I like more of it? Yes. Do I have it in my life everywhere all the time? It's been a choice to immerse my world in places like that. It's like, this is normal for me to say, I need to attend to my grief. I'm going to go to a community grief ritual. And I know that that's a completely foreign concept for a lot of cultures, because we do grief so differently in different ways and places. But the village is alive. It's not completely gone. We might need to look for it. We might need to be willing to cultivate it in our own way, in our own communities.
Right. Yeah, I see it a lot. So I have a lot of family on both sides in Italy, and my cousin was once telling me that they still teach the meaning of the piazza in schools, like why they have the piazza. It's not just something that happened. It's a way to pull each little village together, so people can see each other, people can interact, and like there really is a benefit that even if they're going to still build modern cities in Italy, it's very likely they're going to continue to have these piazzas, because it's a woven fabric of the community.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I was wondering, is it possible for you to take us through some of your book for like a book for a little bit, just so we can see what one's like?
Absolutely. Let's share the screen, and we'll get up the Hug Who Got Stuck. Share screen.
Great. Yeah, because I don't think we have time to go through the whole book, because if people are listening in their car, maybe they'll be too relaxed by it, and then we're off the road. We want our listeners to be safe.
Michael, can you see it?
I can.
Okay, great. So here's our story. That's a little hug if you've never seen one before. This book is dedicated to all who hug. And I'll take you as far as the cliffhanger, which will drive you nuts because you want to know what happened at the end of the story. So every story, every time, we just take these 4 breaths together. Even if you're driving, you can do it safely with your eyes open. First one, breathing in, I breathe for me. Nice breath in. I breathe for you. I breathe for us. And I breathe for all that surrounds us. So my body just dropped. I can hear my voice slowing down. I can feel my interiority better. And I can feel a connection with you opening, Michael. So, once upon a time, on a very ordinary day, deep in the center of a very ordinary heart, an extraordinary thing happened. Deep in the center of this heart was a hug factory. The hug factory made the most warm, cozy, cuddly hugs. There's a beautiful image of the hug factory to explore, including solar panels that catch all the love when it comes in. Each hug was freshly made and specially encoded with just the right amount of love and care to delight the heart it was made for. Being a hug wasn't always easy. Sometimes a lonely thought or bad feeling would trap a hug in a sticky web. There's a web there that says, I'm not good enough, nobody loves me, anxious, who cares, I'm all alone. So to help hugs deliver their love and care was a big sign on the factory wall. Reminders to being a great hug. 1. Breathe in love to glow brightly. 2. Focus entirely on the heart the love is for. And 3. Don't pay too much attention to the web of sticky thoughts. On most days, you could see streams of hugs entering and leaving the door of the heart, zooming away like bees from a hive. But not on this day. On this day, there was a problem. One special hug on its way out of the heart got stuck. Very, very stuck. Dun, 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 dun.
No, let's keep going. Let's finish
Yeah.
it. I'm invested.
This is what happens, isn't it? Well, let me get that back to there. So we'll see what happens. This hug had forgotten the third rule. It fought against the web of sticky thoughts to get free, but every wriggle and squirm trapped the hug even more. Soon the hug ran out of breath and lost its glow. Oh, the pages getting darker and the colors. Inside, the heart became horribly congested with crowds of hugs waiting to get out. Unused hugs were put into boxes until every inch of space was filled up. Outside the heart, there was also a problem. A traffic jam of visiting hugs couldn't get in to deliver their special love and care. Uh-oh. Soon the factory stopped making new hugs. There was only one stuck hug in the center of one ordinary heart, but all around the world, hugs lost a little of their glow. What's going to happen? I can't leave you now because it would be too hard to stop. The hug sighed helplessly. This is part of the remedy. Can we all sigh? It stopped wriggling, stopped squirming, and stopped fighting. In that moment, something magical happened. As it stopped wriggling, it breathed in love and glowed brighter. As it stopped squirming, it remembered the heart it was made for. As it stopped fighting, it slipped right past the web of sticky thoughts. Free! The hug glowed brighter and brighter, zooming away toward the one special heart it was made for. The hug factory clinked and whirled back to life. A flood of hugs passed in and out of the heart, each delivering their special love and care. It was just one hug who got unstuck in the center of one ordinary heart, and all around the world, an extraordinary softening happened. The end. There's your little daily hug meter, which is our activity page. We want to have 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and 12 hugs a day for growth. And that's a quote that comes from Virginia Satir, who was the mother of family therapy.
That's great. I really like the part where the hug is going specifically for the heart that it was made for, because I think it's and the part where incoming hugs are backed up and they can't get in, because I think a lot of times you think some people are emotionally closed off, so they're not able to give love to people that they love, but also it's hard for them to even receive it, even if love's coming in towards them. If that receiving meter isn't on, or the hug factory is closed, then they can't receive it, and it creates this really ugly negative cycle. So that's really great. Can you share how you developed that idea for like the hug factory and hugs? Like how did that idea start from the beginning and grow to what it was, or what it is?
The story woke me up whilst I was trying to have a nap, and I had to write it down. And that was kind of the starting point where this thematically emerged. And then Alexis Aronson, the illustrator on this one, she came back to me and said, I've drawn the hug factory. I want to tell you how it works. And I went, cool. I was like, this is brilliant. And it really her genius and her playful insight that has her come back and go, yep, there's solar panels that catch the love when it comes in from the hugs, and there's baby hugs growing in a forest of trees that's hydroponically drip fed by stardust, rainbow light, and a basket of warm fuzzy feelings. And this is what the encoding room looks like, which was something that was in the script that I'd given her. But she had to develop all of the imagery around it. We had this conversation around, like, what does a hug look like, right? How do we draw it? And I was like I knew about the electromagnetic field of the heart, and I knew about the Heart Math Institute that has this toroidal field that makes up the hug factory in the heart. And here I'll make a stretch. Here's our first and only plushie that we've now made.
That thing looks awesome.
Isn't it awesome? It's like you can get a little squeezy hug and you can keep it at home, and it's here to help us attune and regulate, and just to feel safe and loved again, like everything that I'm working on. That's, if I can do that and I can help you with that, like 10% more than you're already doing it, my work here is done. Like that's the mission.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Thanks you for sharing that book. I'll try to cut that part for YouTube and just have a story time for parents to use.
Please.
I was hoping you could tell me more about your work with the Mankind Project as well. I was just looking it up recently, actually. I mentioned I'm trying to write a nonfiction book right now, and my book coach had mentioned the Mankind Project shortly before I found you on that website, or right. You found me, as it were. And so I was hoping you could describe what it is and how your work with it has maybe even impacted the stories.
Yeah, so for a bit of backstory, all of the personal development work that I did, and most of the personal development world is 80% women and 20% men. And I was immersed in that. I was in the healing school environment, and there were very few men in it, and yet I had to heal my experience of growing up in all boys Christian education environment under the apartheid era in South Africa, and it was just very hostile. I didn't feel safe with men. I didn't trust them. I didn't even know that I didn't trust them. It was that bad. And somewhere along the journey, I got introduced to the Mankind Project. It's a global men's work organization. It got started in the 80s in the US. And by this stage, there was a very strong community in South Africa. They offer a 3-day weekend called the New Warrior Training Adventure. And it is in many ways a rite of passage and an initiatory experience. And I say that in the way that, going back to the village and how we lost our growing up at initiations, right? It would be, the transition from boyhood to manhood wasn't really marked by anybody in my world. And so there I was in my early 30s when I discovered this men's work and had to face some pretty big demons around coming into trust and safety with men. And it opened up a whole space for me. I got involved in their men's groups and the men's circles that happened. And then whenever I've traveled, and I've moved since then in South Africa, I've lived in Scotland, I've been back to South Africa, and now living in the States. The first thing that I've done is I've found a circle of men through this community. And I'm a peer in it. I'm not a leader. I don't sell anything in the space to this community. It's a space where I can go and belong as a man. And just as a concept of how that weekend is set up, there were 32 men going through that weekend when I did it in South Africa, and there were 55 men on staff. So this is not like one guru standing at the front telling you how to be a man. This is every type of man in the room saying, hey, brother, like, here, this is important for us, that we can find our way into healthy masculinity, that we work a lot with integrity, work a lot with mission. What is your mission in the world? How are you in integrity with living into your mission this week and next week and the following week? How can we hold you accountable so that when you say you're going to take a step towards living in your mission and you fall short of that, we can look at the shadows that are underneath it, that are sabotaging you having the life you want to create for yourself. And we can do that in a loving way, but I will love that's also got the fierceness of warrior energy in it. It's got the executive leadership of the king energy, the archetype also of the lover energy, and then the fourth archetype of the magician, who can pull a rabbit out of the hat. I have a lot of magician energy myself. I can pull a story out of thin air, and that is an example of my magician energy coming in. So I have friends around the world, good men friends who I can now call on and do, and it just made me so much safer in myself and safer as a man in my relationships with all the people that I engage with.
Right. Yeah, that's the experience I've had in some of the research I've been doing as well, is that men just don't have the community of men like women have with random women they'll meet on the street, and all of a sudden they're sharing their lives and going through things. Because I think maybe you've hit it on the head that like a lot of men just don't feel safe sharing with other men because there's this built-in either hostility or competitiveness. Whereas if you reveal yourself to have a weakness, God forbid you're human, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, that there's the weak pack, and it's a really insidious way to look at potentially friendships. And I've been lucky to be to found a lot of good men along the way. And now that I'm doing this work and research, I've started kind of, for lack of a better term, trying to level up those friendships, because the ones that were already close and open and we did share our lives and our struggles, we've just increased it for how open we are with each other. And it's hard because you can when you start meeting people, men that are more open-hearted, you can definitely see the other men that are still struggling, ones that really don't want to be aware of some of that hostility that they have in them, and then other men that are really open, and you find like, oh, this is someone that I can grow closer to and have in my life for some time. And like, so when you go to a new place, how do you connect through the Mankind Project, or how do you find people that are a good fit to hang with?
Yeah, I mean, the Mankind Project has phenomenal global website systems, so you can plug into each community's got a community coordinator. You can find them on the website once you're part of that back end portal. But the front end's got plenty for somebody who's just listening, going, "This sounds interesting. How can I sit in a men's circle for the first time? I haven't done this before." You can go to Mankind Project. You Google that, find your region, and just reach out. And very often there's a possibility to experience sitting in a men's group before doing the weekend, and at some stage doing that weekend is really the transformational piece. It's there's nothing quite like it in 20 years of personal development programs. It still stands out to me as the singularly most impactful 3 days of my life, and really it's that good. And what was for me. And it was for me, and it has been very much, say, this centerpiece running through. It gave me the leg of the chair that I didn't have for balance. So I've got the world of women and healing. I've got the world of men's work here. I've got the world of family that I've started to learn about in my time in the States in the educational space, and central to it all now, my exploration into creativity and the meeting point between creativity and psychology.
Right. Yeah, and I'd like to get into that in a second. The one point I want to stay on in some of the men's work is I tend to take umbrage with this idea, and I'd love to get your feedback on it, of like having these archetypes of, you know, the king, the warrior, magician. I tried to read that book as well, and I maybe made it halfway through.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really hard to subscribe to archetypes, because even in a lot of this healing men's work, we give all this healing and love stuff. We still give it only to women, to say like, okay, men need to embrace their masculine, embrace their feminine, and the feminine side is all like the humanity part of who we are. And I feel like we still take that away from boys, because in this giant man box when we were being raised, like it's too nebulous of a definition of what it means to be a man. So what boys come away with is that, oh, don't be a girl or don't be gay. And so I feel like when men grow up without all the emotional resonance that I feel was taken from them as boys, and then you tell them, okay, now you have to be more feminine, I feel like there's just a cognitive dissonance. You're like, well, wait a minute, but society doesn't accept me if I have more emotions and have more of this. So I feel like we need to integrate these things, and just like we just all need to be human. Just
Right.
was as like, you know, I'm sure women are learning to be more, as the feminist movement taught them, to be more decisive, to not be so accommodating, to have opinion, you know, and to do all these things that aren't like masculine. You're like, no, you just, it's another aspect of your humanity. And so this is the thing I'm still working on as well, and is wondering what, like, how you feel about these sorts of concepts.
But so I love the conversation about it. It's a healthy, robust inquiry that I'm hearing you're making. And there's two things for me that are interestingly around the archetypes. Just that king, lover, warrior, magician, for me, are like, we spoke earlier about emotional depth and, in a way, granularity, and about having some different ability to express our feelings. So, anger is just one word. Frustration falls under anger. Irritation falls under anger. In the wheel of emotions, there's these little like, frustrated, and it's like, maybe if anger is physical, maybe anger is quiet and brooding. There's
Right.
different aspects of that, and we want to be able to recognize the different ones when they're in ourselves and when they're in others, so that we can identify what's the emotion that's happening. And I use that as an example to say this is the same way that I would view archetypes, that I would look at it and go, there are times when it's really helpful when I can drop my shoulders back, lift my chin, gaze out, and have an embodied sense of my own autonomy, of who I am, that I am the king of my world. Now, I don't want that to be the narcissistic, overblown king, but I just want to say the authority of this decision. I have agency. When we're trying to develop agency as a skill in kids at a young age, here we are as grown men going, I still have agency. And I can look out over the landscape of my life and say, there's my partner, there's my children, there's my jobs, there's my hobby. How am I attending to them? Like a king might glance out over the fields and go, it's time to plant over here, and it's time to let this soil lie fallow. And it's like just for me, the combination of the body and the posture and this archetype is something that I've then been able to literally use as a tool in a day-by-day basis, going, I recognize that I'm feeling like I'm very much in my sensitivity at the moment, and I actually might be too far into it. It would be helpful for me to have a little bit of my fierceness, because I'm allowed to be that. I just want it to not be the type of fierceness that injures anybody. Let me draw on that character of the warrior, as if you had theater school, and you got to put on the wardrobe of each of these different postures. You would immediately find yourself adopting a different character just by trying on the different clothes. And this is again generating that internal flexibility to occupy different positions in ourselves. And like, we have so many different, the me, who's me, it's like this me in this moment, this me scared, right? Because something that's happening here reminds me of my childhood, and that didn't go well. And this me is fiercely defended because something in my childhood happened didn't go so well. And this me here is loving to this other me who's scared. And then like now we've got this fluidity in our internal space. I mean, maybe it's inner child languaged for some people, maybe it's parts work from the internal family systems that we talk about, but in some way all of these models are giving us ways to relate and connect both internally with ourselves in these different ways we show up, and then hey, is this my 4-year-old showing up with your 4-year-old? Because that can be fun, let's go play. Or is this my, do I have my my mature masculine available? And that to me is what the call and the invitation is in all men's work, is to say, what is my mature masculine and how do I call it forward? Let me build my own relationship with this and see the impact in the world as I start to show up more fully in that.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the healthiest way to look at those sort of archetypes, because I think the word I like the most that you mentioned there was allowed, that you allowed yourself to move between these archetypes, because I think that's one thing that men and women in a different respect, we don't think we're allowed to be a certain way.
Right.
Like in society, and this is pretty ubiquitous through Eastern cultures and Western cultures have different things that they struggle with, but like in the West, for example, women don't feel that they can be angry, that they can not be accommodating, that all these things are kind of built in, and just as men feel like they can't cry or they can't feel sad about these things, and I think it handicaps both of us. I think maybe where the archetype stood out most to me was about like the word we use, king, for example, because like a king stands above everybody else, and that feels like the idea of the masculine that we already have a problem with in society, that people think that like they can I know what the problem is and I can solve it. We just need more of me, right? And so those sorts of ideas, but the way that you described it, as far as like planning and leadership and things like that stuff I can subscribe to, and it's great that you found like a healthy way to move through these things, and these are all concepts that you found in the Mankind Project.
Yeah, in the Mankind Project and some of Robert Bly's writing. There is a distorted king, right, as much as a distorted warrior and a distorted lover. So it's like there's a healthy and an unhealthy perspective that's held in each of these archetypes to look at it, because and here you're sharing with us some of your own material that comes up. It's like the king, man, that authority thing. I'm like, wow, Michael, I want to talk to you about what's authority been like for you. Now I'm really interested in that, because it would appear from your response to that archetype that maybe it's the tip of an iceberg, or maybe there's somewhere that we could go and we could explore and go, okay. So
you nailed it. I've had a problem with authority my whole life. Yeah. And so when I hear like someone wants to be a king, get out of here. Like the monarchy is a failed state. What are we doing?
Right. And what are you going to use inside yourself to slay that king, right? Are you going to go to a distorted warrior energy to cut somebody down, or are you going to go into like just an embodied leadership position that says, hey, hold on, your ruling over is inappropriate and out of order, and we're gonna rein you back in here, and you have your seat at the table, but you don't get to run the way things are going from this attitude.
Right. You don't get to run shit. Hold on.
Right.
There was no vote.
Yeah.
And that is, this conversation is richer for the archetype idea, because you're right. Like I think when I was younger, it would have been more the warrior that would have been like, okay, there's another king to slay now. And where now it's more like, can I look for collaboration here? And I'd like for us to be on this same level in environments that serve that. But then when let's say there's a distorted king, and you find out they're a distorted king, now I'd probably be more likely to remove myself from a situation than pick up a warrior's shield. What's the word we're looking for? Like more philosophically than I would before. But I guess moving on from that, I'd love to hear your ideas on the intersect of creativity and psychology. You're mentioning that you've been working on a lot of that recently, so I don't know where you'd like to start on that.
Yeah, I mean, as I shared right at the beginning, I didn't have my creativity until my early 30s. And so when it came back, and it came back with a flurry, and all of a sudden there's 23 kids' books, I started to really pay attention to it. And one of the projects that I did in early 2010 was a quirky project where I went out and invited people to donate poetry for the people of Haiti. And it was just after this huge tsunami and earthquake that had happened there. And uh, it's a longer story, but the net of it is that I've watched 2,500 poems be spontaneously written in the streets of the UK for me and my alter ego of the poem catcher, who was out at the time with a butterfly catching net and my kilt, getting people to write poetry. And I didn't know that I was making a pseudo-scientific case study on how creativity moves through the human energy system. But I had just finished these 4 years of training at Healing School. I was viewing the world through the lens of energetics, and I was watching. And then as my client base has grown and my therapeutic work, it's fascinating for me that so many people have great ideas, and then somehow those ideas don't get what they need to come to fruition. And the idea is either, the moment an idea shows up, the first thing that happens afterwards is this voice of negativity, and that are echoes from childhood that come and go, this probably won't work. Why bother? It's not that important. Now, funny, we just read the hug story. It's all the sticky thoughts that were in the hug story. It's the
Right.
same thing. But I was very interested that it always, always, always happens. That the moment there's a creative impulse, it's immediately followed by a whole range of these negative thoughts that actually, then my question is like, well, if they always happen, it doesn't help for us to make them wrong, like as if they shouldn't happen. Instead, I wanted to take a wider view of wholeness that says, okay, they must be here serving some sort of a purpose. And in fact, that purpose, I believe, is in service to the fulfillment of the creative vision. It's just part of the safety system that comes up. And it's right that as we leave the cave, we look left and right and make sure there's no saber-toothed tigers. It's not right for us to then stop and go back into the cave. If there's no saber-toothed tigers, we must keep going. And so I'm mapping out the stages of the creative process, and from this first impulse through to the first negative thoughts, through to what it takes to refocus, the thresholds we've got to cross. So much of our creativity happens within us, unseen by the world. And then there's a threshold, like when I did my first story, I had to cross and go, I've made a leap and I've made something. Here it is. It's physical. You can hold it up. You can look at it, and the world can critique it and can give it feedback. And then I've got to metabolize that feedback. I've got to make sense of it. I've got to go back into my interior at the end of the day and go, was that a day well lived? Did I survive it existentially?
Right.
The feedback and the opinions. And what have I decided about my world for tomorrow? Have I decided that I should probably never try anything creative again because it was such a disaster, which might have been a painful injury that folks know from when they were young? Or have I decided that I can iterate, I can reiterate, I can take the things that I learned and I can infuse them in, and I can come out and I can improve the story that I'm making, or I can make another painting and improve it, or learn another song. And it doesn't matter that I fumbled the chords yesterday when I was singing it. Today, I'm allowed the journey of the practice and without my psychology slamming on the brakes and stopping my creative self-expression.
Right. And so you're in the middle of that project now.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm living and breathing it. It's like there's 70,000 words in a book. I'm working with an editor every day. I've got to face the same things, right? I've got to go into the newness and look for what is my creative impulse for today. How is the words going to come out on the page?
And
For I for
sorry, are you putting in like psychological studies in there as well, or is this mainly like what you've experienced going onto the page solely?
Yeah, it'll come in a visual framework. So it's a little bit like looking at the hero's journey map,
Yeah.
and it becomes very accessible. Because I'm a storyteller, most of this is coming in through the frame of story, and and personal narrative and stuff that I've observed. I use a lot of metaphor, and I want to start a conversation. I don't want to be right. I'm learning a living, breathing way of being, and I'm here saying we're all creative. We're all creative all the time. In fact, that these cycles are happening. We're expanding into the world, and then we're having pauses. We're contracting again. Uh, how do we begin to be attuned to that? And the benefit being, because again, once I attune to myself along that way, that ADHD dysregulation that I had, that settled down a lot for me. I found my place better. I found my purpose more. I was able to see projects through to successful completion, without hijacking that myself and going, I've got to start a new project. I was like, it's not working. I'll just start a new thing. So there's categories of people who I see that, like, we've got a lot of things. At the moment, it's like a lot of great ideas, none that get finished, or the people
Right.
with no ideas, but if they could probably finish somebody else's work, but finishing their own work is really challenging for them.
Right. That's really interesting. So, are you, because a book that I read every time I sit down to write, I read like a chapter from this still writing.
Still writing.
Yeah, from Danny Shapiro. And honestly, I don't even use tabs. That tells you how much benefit I got out of this book. But I think even like going through that, I think something in there would probably catch an idea that maybe you could add into your hero's journey, because she just talks about her writing life, and how it and but it's interesting how more or less every little, because every little chapter or section is, I think, at most three pages, but it also applies to life in general. So I wonder, is what you're creating kind of like the emotional side of Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art? Because his is like The War of Art, like again, that's more of like a, I guess to use your archetypes, more of like a warrior's view on producing art, and he talks about the resistance, and every day we need to work against the resistance. Whereas it seems like you're taking more of like an emotional standpoint for how we're going through this, or is that wrong?
I'm taking a standpoint. I'm looking to see if I can show you something that'll in 60 seconds give you the a sense of the standpoint that I'm taking. I'll stick this right up in front of everybody to see, and
Sure.
I'm going to share.
Yeah. So anyone listening, please go over to YouTube and check it out. Check it out.
Right. So just very simply, I mean, you can take a screenshot of this and come back at it. This is this is just a journey that I think that we can find ourselves in, and that if we can find ourselves where we are in our own cycle of creativity, and it's too much for us to go through time wise right now, but if you can
Right.
locate where you are, what's happening, and if I'm right with my hypothesis that these things always happen in a particular sequence in every creative process, then you can know what it is to do when. You can know when you're starting to feel a wobble, that it's probably because you're doing something new in the world, and it's time to pedal faster, not to slam the brakes on the bicycle. You actually want to keep going. You can expect the mirroring. You can know that some of that mirroring is going to land, some of it's not going to land, and you can begin to create your own sense of satisfaction. This is all to me about satisfaction, about coming into the satisfaction of who you are in your journey your journey of self-expression. It's like it's a birthright for us to feel good about who we are.
Right.
Uh,
I love that. Yeah, because I found, it's because I'm also working with a book coach who's based in South Africa, and one of the biggest benefits of that is like we have a writing session every Wednesday, and then like a weekend writing session virtually once a month, and just hearing from, like, at the top of every hour we all speak a little bit, and hearing how messy this creation process is for everybody. Like the
Yes.
book coach, she's written, I think, 14 books, like either her own or ghostwritten. And she tells me of like, it's just like, it occupies your entire mind, and it's so messy, and it
Yep.
changes daily as
Yep.
you're creating it. Like you'll write a chapter you're very happy with, and then down the road you realize that happy chapter has got to go.
Yep. Yep.
And so all of these things is like a creative destruction that's happening in real time. And so it's cool that you're trying to deconstruct how it's going, because that is the one thing that these books like The War of Art and Still Writing and all of these other books, or was it
Julia Cameron, and
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, the Artist's Way. Like those
that's
three
right.
books. Like I think like just not feeling that you're the only one having a hard time doing this. That, like every artist goes through this and they struggle a real struggle. That
Yes.
it's really cool. So I'm excited to see your addition to that super helpful and needed category.
Yeah, I mean, one of my good friends is Jeff Goins. Now, his book, the Art of Work and Real Artists Don't Starve. Jeff carries a quote, which I think is an Emerson quote, which is, I don't know what I think until I see what I've written," um, which is a lot of the
Tremendous.
process. You sit down
Yeah.
at the page. What have you got on the page? You've got a concept of an idea of where you might go, but it's a blank page. And then your fingers start doing something. And I often sit back mesmerized as my fingers type, and I'm going, wow, that's great. Doesn't happen all the time, but a lot of the
Sure.
other times I'm looking, all right, geez, I'm not writing anything sensible at all. But
Right.
it is that emergence. And then Jeff, also his piece of advice to authors would be to say, um, don't take more than 3 or 4 months to write a book, really in the heart of it. The editorial process can take longer, but it says after that, you're writing a different book. Um,
Right.
and this speaks to what you were talking about here, where you write a chapter and it's great, and you come back and you think you can just add on to that, and then you write the next chapter a little bit later, and it skews the thing that you just wrote. And then all
Right.
of a sudden, this is what our editors are for, bless them, right? They can hold something with less, that it's not personal to them, right? Whereas for us, it's like, this word,
Right.
I've got to keep this word, I can't let go of it, I'll die on the
Right.
sword of this word, it just fits here. And like, nope, it's gone, we deleted
Yeah,
it,
well,
we
I'm
didn't need
even
it.
finding a lot of emotional blocks to even sit down and wrestle with that page, thinking like,
Yes.
who am I to write this? Should I be writing this? And so I have to convince myself, and like, this is an experiment. We just want to finish it, and then you can decide if you want to publish it or not. Because if you finish it, at least you finish it.
Yeah.
And so like that's the thing to at least take off my parking brake.
Yeah.
That gets me off the hill. But it's yes, but I'm trying to write more now, because it's a monster that just needs to be fed, and the only
Right.
thing you can feed it is time.
Yeah.
And
And it's a nourishing monster. And the thing that I would, the little activity that I have folk do with what you just shared, that moment where you're like, I can't even sit down, like, the why should I bother? I just take a moment. I'm totally, totally, totally expecting that moment to happen every time I sit down to write. For myself, it still happens. And I keep a
right,
little notepad on the side, or post-its are great. And I get my post-it out, and I just write down, the what are my fears telling me? What's that voice? I just write them down, and then I do this little quarter turn, and I just go and look at them like they're my beloveds, and I go, "Hi guys, I'm so glad you're here. I'm like, I've been expecting you. I've been waiting for you. I knew you were coming. I've got just the place for you. It's over here." And it's like, out of scene, right? They don't get to be driving the ship, but there's something that happens in the metaphysics of that, where we draw it out of the miasma of our cloudy swirling by using our pen and our paper and our hand, and we put it, now I'm here and they're there, and I can look at them and I can see them, I can locate them, I can give them a place, put them on the wall next to me here, and then I can go on with the task that I was doing. And I've attended to my safety system. That's all they are. They're a beautiful part of my safety system. A little bit of residual of the reptilian brain, a little bit of residual of my childhood shitty experiences that said I couldn't do things. and the competitive boys environment that we've touched on, and all the non-creative space and all of that stuff.
Right.
But it's okay. They're over here. Now I lift my eyes again, and I literally do this physically. I sit in front of my desk. There's a wall in front of me, but I still lift my eyes and I gaze out, and my body takes this posture of believing that I can get from where I am to the vision that I'm seeing in the future. And things open, the chest opens and my heart opens, and then I put my shoulder and I lean and I get on with the work of it. And they're little hacks, right, for us to get past this this thing we call writer's block.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely going to use that with the post-it notes I have here, and it's kind of like the ritual why I have the still writing book in front of me, because like when I read her writing and how she looks at writing, there's a nostalgia that she writes with and a romance that she writes with, and so I kind of feel like I drop into like that writer's mentality that she so embodies, and it helps me just be like, okay, this is what I'm doing today. And the fear part that you mentioned is a nice addition to that. So so thank you for that.
Good. Also, look, we need company in this space. I'm so glad that you've got a writers group. This is something that I'm developing. I think we need a creative huddle where everybody. So many of us, when we have a creative idea, we want to do our project, and then the challenge is to continually prioritize it, and particularly, like, as you hear, we've got to prioritize it and then go into our demons in order to get the thing done.
Right.
So I do a lot of co-working. Often it's like, okay, great. I have thematic co-working things. I have my creative co-writers. We get together and write. I've got my folk who help me with money and finance, and we get together, just work on our money finance stuff. I've got the folks in the coaching. Like, we just get together and support each other. I'm creating the virtual village. Zoom gives us all the technology that we need. And, if folks want to come and join in a co-writing session, I want to come and join you now. That sounds great. I'm in. Count me in. Let's go. I need all the support I can get.
Right. That's great. Yeah. After this call, I'll send you a link, because I think just for the writers group, I think she charges maybe like a fee per month, which is super reasonable.
Great.
So yeah. Well, anyhow, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're in Hawaii, so you're probably winding down the day. But I really want to thank you for being here and all the effort you put into your books and sharing that hug one with me. I really, really, really loved it. And I think one of my best friends is having a kid next month, and I think I have an idea for what I can gift them. So thank
Beautiful.
you for your time, Andrew, and for being here.
Yeah, Michael, to you, firstly, thank you for hosting, for having such a rich conversation, not only with me, the other guests you've had on your podcast are fantastic. And to the parents who happen to be listening, my parting shot is, hey guys, you're doing great. If you can please drop into the knowing, if you stayed in this conversation and you were engaged in some way and fascinated by it, you're a good enough parent. Like, you're a good person, just engaged in this type of environment. Let your anxieties come down just 10%. You don't have to let them all go. Just let them drop just a little bit, and relax into who you are. And this is what we want your kids to be able to do, and you can model that by taking that embodied position for yourself and just like, hand on heart, oh, I'm doing okay. Good humaning. Another day of good humaning.
Good humaning. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
pleasure
you,
to be here with you.
A good humaning to you.
Yes. Oh.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you didn't enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.